Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have another Varonis with us. Hello, Kilian, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be on again. This is always the highlight of my week.
Awesome. Me too. So we are going a little bit early today, but if you are watching this on repeat, I will make sure to drop the links in our Discord server if you miss it the first time. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about this week, a lot of news. A lot of people, per usual, are going to be getting free credit monitoring. And of course, we also have some interesting stuff from our sponsor, Varonis. This week, we actually have some security research that has come out, which is kind of surprising because this research takes a long time to do. And there was just a research drop last week where we were talking about Salesforce ghost sites. So that was cool research because a lot of people use Salesforce and there is a specific way you're supposed to shut down the sites. And Varonis researchers found out that if you don't do it the correct way, people can actually access the information in these very juicy databases that sometimes have tons of details about customers or other sensitive stuff that companies definitely don't really want out there. And we'll talk about some companies that unfortunately had incidents that mirror this sort of possibility that Varonis researchers were kind of talking about. But this is actually different research. This is new research. So Kilian, you want to talk a little bit about the, let's see, it's called Imposter Syndrome, UI bug in Visual Studio lets attackers impersonate publishers. And let me actually throw this up on the screen.
Yeah. So this is a pretty cool one. The high level is basically, so Kody, if you scroll down, I don't know, maybe about halfway, there's a pretty good visual representation. So in Visual Studio, you're not supposed to be able to change some of the information. So right there, like you can leave it on the top one. One up. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, you're supposed to be able to see this information. It's supposed to be immutable. If you go into Visual Studio, you don't have the ability to change some of this information because it's security related and it tells you if it's digitally signed and whatnot. However, what we discovered is that you can actually just open up the package as if it was a zip, basically, and edit the content inside of it. And you can add a couple extra lines into the code and then basically add new lines to it. And eventually, if you go down to the second one, if it's an unsigned VISX, this is what it'll say, digital signature, none. But if you go in there, you edit it manually, and you add a whole bunch of new lines, essentially what you can do is push all of this content all the way down. And then replace it with whatever you want here. So you can say, yeah, digitally signed. So it's going to, it's so, I mean, I want to say straightforward, but it's so clever. You basically just overflow it off the screen and it pops off the bottom there and it'll trick somebody into installing it. So it's a really clever way to bypass the human element. Again, we've trained ourselves a little bit to look for this. Hey, yeah, I see the the security signature there. Oh, it's signed by Microsoft, verified. That's great. Like we've trained ourselves to look for that. But again, with a very straightforward but clever and novel attack, really, you can trick somebody into thinking they're installing something valid and legitimate. But it's something malicious that you've crafted yourself.
That's so cool. Okay, so this first example is a real extension with the digital signature. So this shows where you can get the signature, and it has like a little bit more information, but basically we're just looking for an identity here that says, okay, this has been verified by the operating system as being published by this trusted authority. And theoretically, unless some like keys have been compromised somewhere, that should mean that it's relatively safe to install. So anybody who's security minded is going to be looking for this, or at least expecting it when installing something. But the fact we can make it look pretty much the same, like it still gives us that identity that we're looking for. It attributes it to someone and it looks like the operating system is telling it to us. Like that's a very clever way of getting around this warning that's supposed to say, hey, like we actually don't know who made the software and it might actually be dangerous.
Yeah. The nice thing, the bonus side is that it is patched already. We communicated with Microsoft on this. It was fixed, I believe, as of the April update. So if you haven't updated, it's probably very important. I believe Microsoft assigned this like a medium criticality, but we strongly believe that it warrants additional disclosure from us, even though it's patched already, just to bring the awareness up, because this could be a huge issue. I mean, we've seen so many times, the attackers targeting developers to get in and get that foothold as kind of a part of a supply chain attack. So This is really cool research that we come up with.
Yeah, no, I noticed that a lot of the time when a website is compromised, like a distribution website for a very popular piece of software in, a supply chain attack, like at that point, they have direct access to all these customers that are going to be downloading a certain amount of this thing like every day. And that malicious software is going to be ready to infect anyone who allows it to get installed on the computer. So it really becomes just a matter of making it look as legitimate as possible once it's downloaded. Because, if you're downloading from a trusted source and they get compromised, you're probably not going to know unless something goes off on your computer warning you that something's wrong. And in that scenario, really the only thing that would show up would be this kind of warning that it's not signed by the organization you're expecting. So, if you go and download OBS, which has been targeted over and over and over, just as an example of a project that's popular for this sort of like watering hole or like supply chain attack, if it wasn't signed by who you expected, then you wouldn't install that software if you were kind of like cognizant of it. So I don't know, this is very, very cool because there's a number of different scenarios where this is the only thing standing between a victim and getting compromised is this sort of like confirmation.
Or think about if we think about the LastPass issue where they specifically targeted the developer. Again, this could be deployed in that scenario where you could, maybe do a similar domain type of situation and target them with a spam email about a legitimate update for something that you can suspect that they use. So there are many ways that an attacker could leverage something like this.
Yeah, this is really cool. So seems good that Microsoft has jumped on that, even though they don't see this as a severe vulnerability, they've still jumped on patching it because it does seem like as an escalation attack or like a social engineering attack, this is something that could be very valuable. I mean, my immediate thought was to like a supply chain style attack where you gain access to a third-party website that's really popular, but maybe not super secure, and you start impacting people that are visiting that website and downloading things thinking that they're legitimate.
Right.
That's cool. That's very cool. Oh yeah, and who, was Delev the one who found this, or was he the one who wrote it up?
I'm not sure who all on the research team participated in this. I mean, he certainly was part of it, of course, because I know you work with him quite a lot.
Yeah, very cool. I just love seeing people on the research team shout it out because this is hard and very interesting work, and we don't always get to talk about the research that we do, but trying to do these releases more and like talking about the sorts of things that like Varonis customers are up against and then like things we've discovered to help protect them. Like that's really cool stuff we get to give back to the community, when the vendors involved allow us to do so.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we've got a lot more news today. Also, just hello to James, Rational Bushcraft, and Marvin in the chat. Good to see everyone. And one question in the chat, does this bypass the OS check for publisher?
That is a great question. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I didn't get into the back-end research of what all it does. I believe it's just a visual bug, but I think if you accept it, it doesn't necessarily matter. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and I do not use Windows enough to answer that question. So I'm very glad you're on the stream, Kilian. Cool. And also, again, I just want to shout out the Discord server has been very active. A lot of people have been asking questions there for our Wednesday Q&A stream. So if you want to do that, we had Angelina on last week. She did a fantastic job of answering lots of different questions. And we now have a Discord server at nugget, nugget.lol, LOL, if you want to check that out and submit a question for the stream next week. Okay, so I have a lot to show. But first, I'm going to pop up the Discord server just to show it. And while that's loading, I guess I could pull up one of my favorite ones. Anytime there's a news article that starts with the word Florida man, I know I'm in for like a really good story. So, all right, let me go ahead and share this 1 second. There we go.
While you're pulling it up, what's like the Florida man thing? Is it like supposed to say Florida man and then your birthday or something to find which Florida man you are? I think is the joke.
Yeah. So in this particular case, we had an entrepreneurial Florida man who decided to create an organization selling network infrastructure to critical organizations. This is like healthcare providers, the military, government agencies, education. He really didn't care who he was selling this to. And it was made to look like brand new Cisco equipment. However, this was actually low-grade, reused, old, or sometimes just very, very cheap networking equipment from like China and Hong Kong that was smuggled in and kind of labeled as something other than what it was.
Sure.
He also gave specific instructions to these low-cost networking equipment suppliers to like either mislabel their shipments or send them in like smaller bundles on different days to avoid being caught. Basically trafficking in counterfeit Cisco products. So in the end, there was a number of different issues with the networking equipment, including security and performance, which is to be expected when running purely counterfeit Cisco equipment. And U.S. Customs and Border Protection caught 180 shipments of counterfeit Cisco devices sent to pro-network entities. So yeah, this is like if people figure they can get away with selling equipment that the people who are going to be using it barely understand, like it gets set up once and nobody ever really like interacts with it after that, maybe they think they're going to get away with this for a while. But the fact that this was such an organized scheme to import counterfeit Cisco devices and like just slap like a new Cisco sticker on them and ship them out to like the military is a pretty bold move. So I think the total dollar amount was $7 million that was confiscated. And he also has to forfeit $15 million in profits. And I guess is facing 6.5 years in prison.
This is, let me call it a low effort type of situation. Well, first off, before I get into that, I quite like Florida. I don't want to say anything bad about Florida. I like it down there. So all of my Florida friends, we're still friends. I like you anyway. But in terms of this is sort of almost, like I said, a low effort type of attack. What's more concerning is, and Kody, and this is a little bit off of the tangent, but the situations where they do get, real Cisco products, they've just been with a compromised or a pre-compromised operating system loaded onto them. So they got the real devices, they've, updated it to a, version of the operating system that's, I'm not going to say counterfeit, but is pre-compromised in some way, and then shipped it out. And that's much more difficult to detect. This is, again, pretty clear by some of the performance and other things like that. But it just goes to show,
Of the two attacks, this one is much more like almost like traditional grifting, where like you're just slapping a sticker on something that's cheaper and sending it out. And whereas like creating your own botnet or being able to access these devices you're sending out later to do nefarious networking stuff, like that is something that is much harder to detect. Is something that you see being done with these sorts of suppliers that are nefarious and shady and looking for like different ways to make money. It's just funny that this guy landed on just like find the cheapest possible, barely passable networking equipment and then just like repackage it and like send it to the army.
Yeah. That's kind of the thing though, is like, and it's not just like an endpoint, but whatever the device happens to be, if somebody compromises that piece of hardware, it doesn't really matter necessarily to a certain extent what type of security you have otherwise. If they have access to that backend infrastructure, like they have access, that goes, for your phone, for anything else. If they can get in there, then they have that foothold already and bypass a lot of the things that you will hope will stop them.
Yeah. All right. Next story. Here we go. This is we're living in the future.
Geez.
So AI generated compromising photos are being used for extortion. So this seems weird, but anybody who has a fair amount of photos of themselves on Instagram, on Facebook, just out there in general, it's possible to generate deepfakes. Of course, like that's kind of like well known now. What hasn't been very well explored is whether or not people will pay to have these images removed if they're not even real in the first place. So in some cases, people have been uploading these directly to websites where people can view them and not even involving extortion in the first place. Other times people will reach out to victims and get them to try to pay to have the images deleted effectively. So this is something that seems unreal, but it actually has been rising in popularity, and the FBI has actually been warning that this is increasing in frequency. Really, the only way to protect yourself here is make sure you keep photos of yourself to a small private circle like a group of people on Facebook, not like
Mhm.
completely public. Like have your Instagram private if you're gonna have a lot of like photos of your face. Aside from that, it's very difficult to kind of like limit photos of yourself, and other things that
Yeah.
could be gathered by someone who wanted to do this sort of attack. So at least the FBI is more understanding of what's going on now. I feel like they like explaining what's happening would probably be easier
Mhm.
now than it was a while ago, but only unfortunately because the practice has become so much more common.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely disgusting, and like the reputational damage, it's just awful. I mean, I, I don't even think I'm going to go out on a limb. I mean, this is one of the most disgusting like abuses you could do to somebody, and it's just, I don't know, it's unconscionable. I don't know, it just kind of makes me sick, to be honest.
Yeah, the whole pipeline of being able to do this, and the fact that a lot of people who get hit with this sort of thing are not going to know where it's from or what happened
Right.
or what this is. Like, it must be a pretty shocking thing for people who have never, there's just this attack hasn't existed
Hmm.
before, and it's a completely new form of extortion.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. Honda. So we were talking a little bit about who's getting free credit monitoring last week in the auto industry with Toyota. And it turns out that the same security researcher that found a bunch of these problems with Toyota
Hmm.
moved right on to another Japanese manufacturer and found another bunch of vulnerabilities that are along the same kind of vein. Now, when we were talking about the Toyota vulnerabilities, these were things that were unintentionally left exposed and left open. And they were very,
Hmm.
very sorry. And they now have a program to monitor all data to make sure it's not exposed. I remember that from last week.
Hmm.
So what happened to Honda? Well, basically the exact same thing. This security researcher, Eaton Zavare, the same one who breached Toyota supplier portal a few months back, was knocking around the same doors and trying to see whether or not all the APIs and all the authentication was in place for Honda's various online services.
Hmm.
And when we're talking about modern cars, these are hyper connected things. There's lots of
Yeah.
databases. There's lots of real time information that's being brought in from the cars, like telematics. And this is really valuable to attackers who might be looking to either attack the manufacturer itself or its customers. So, all right, what was exposed? What did our researcher find? 21,000 customer orders across all dealers were exposed.
Wow.
Name, address, phone number, and order and items ordered. 1,570 dealer websites. It was possible to modify any of these websites, so those were exposed. 3,500 dealer accounts and users/accounts, including first and last name and email address. You could also change the password of any
Mm.
of these users, which means you could basically log in as any of these
Right.
users. So I would go ahead and count this as all pretty much like full account compromise when it comes
Hmm.
to like write permissions here. 1,090 dealer emails, including first and last name. 11,034 customer emails, including first and last name. Stripe, PayPal, and Authorize.net private keys for dealers
Oh.
who provided them. So for people who are
Mhm.
accepting online payments, it might have been possible to maybe intercept payments. That's at least that is the implication here. And then internal financial reports, something every company loves having leaked.
Mhm.
So yeah, like here's a little screenshot of the exposed customer emails, meaning it was actually possible to get in and yeah, like get very, very direct
Mhm.
access to the kind of information you would need to run a pretty sophisticated phishing campaign.
Yeah.
Yes, so very valuable for launching
There you
phishing
go.
campaigns, social engineering attacks, or sold on hacker forums and darknet markets. So, of course, Honda had no idea it was exposing all this data because the security researcher hadn't, knocked their systems and seen if all of their services were up to par in terms of having all the security controls in place. And Varonis also has released some like threat research earlier last year
Mhm.
around like authentication being broken in some of these things that are
Yeah.
supposed to have robust security measures that just aren't implemented correctly. And this is with some like pretty big vendors. So like if you're rolling your own stuff, like I really feel like they probably made some mistakes when it comes to the way that certain things were authenticated. And I mean, in the case of being able to change any user's password in the database, like
Mhm.
obviously there are some issues with database permissions there. So this is becoming increasingly, increasingly like popular for hackers to be like going after vehicle connected systems and databases that might be exposed about customers. We're seeing this sort of news all the time. And you know why? You know why, guys? Let me guess. It's because that they didn't have any bug bounty program. So yeah, no bug bounty program in
Right.
place. Honda did not reward the security researcher for reporting all of this information, which is the exact same outcome as the Toyota case. So even though we are all discussing this now, like that's how big of news this is, there was no reward for this research. And that's exactly why the auto industry is so poorly audited, is because there's very little financial reward. And frequently these companies, they just don't fix stuff, or like they're focused on other things unless the breach is very, very big. So in this case, it looks like both Honda and Toyota are taking steps to fix this sort of thing. Toyota immediately has started implementing like data protection to make sure they know where their data lives and that there's no unauthorized access to it. Because as we at Varonis know, it's very easy to lose track of your data in an organization that's large and has many contractors and stuff like that. So a lot of that kind of looks like par for the course here, and that like both of these organizations are working to make sure that even contractors and other other groups that are plugging into their companies are making sure to implement the kinds of like authentication and like access control that's necessary to manage like all that data and make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. But still very wild. You can read a little bit more about the details, accessing admin panels, all sorts of stuff that this researcher should not have been able to do. And again, no reward for all of this research.
So maybe that's what we should do. We should campaign for some of these organizations to really think about joining a bug bounty program, because it costs, let's say a little bit now versus a lot of brand damage down the road. It's I don't feel like it's that hard. So Honda, if you're watching, please maybe consider paying this researcher.
Pay us researchers. We need it. Yeah. I mean, if you want the best people to come and audit your platform, you really need to make sure that it's at least as rewarded as hacking on other sorts of platforms that are just as critical. So here's a question from the chat. Is it become a trend for big five-star corporations to be exposed online? Yes. So a lot of the time, these ransomware groups have found out that it's more profitable to just like either threaten to leak the data or leak the data directly than to actually ransomware these companies in the first place. And sometimes it's just because these companies have defenses that makes it too difficult to ransomware them. So they'll just extract the data and then try to exploit them. But a lot of former ransomware gangs have turned to just exploitation, because just to contain the reputational damage and prevent, like their customers from being affected, a lot of these businesses are willing to keep confidential information confidential if these ransomware groups get a chance to grab it. So yes, it actually is a trend in cybercrime that they're moving more towards like extortion attacks because they're easier to pull off than ransomware attacks, which are hugely destructive and impossible to deny in many cases, like kind of removing the option for companies to keep it quiet in the first place.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of this goes back to, well, one, if you look at the interconnected nature of all of these things, it's not just, the cars and the telemetry that you're getting off of them, all of the systems. And just like we're talking about the supply chain attack, like everything is so interconnected that it's hard to know where the data lives in the first place. You might have an idea of where it's supposed to be, but there's probably tons of places where it actually lives. And then how it's flowing between all of these other systems, especially as you hook it up. And I mean, Kody, I think we talked about this maybe even years ago, with some of the disclosure forms where it's like, oh, your data might go to these 90 different third-party vendors as it moves across. And I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing kind of, I'm not going to say our worst fears come true, because I'm never going to say it couldn't get any worse, because it always seems to, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. So next up we have a good story, a story like, so Kilian, have you used the new Bing yet?
It's always popping up, but I haven't really used it for anything. Like I haven't gotten creative with it, I guess I'll say that way.
Let's see. So I really enjoy Microsoft Edge, just because it is a window to Bing. So you start here, I can tell it what level of like explicitness I want in terms of like being really, really accurate or being really creative. So like I could tell it, make a creative response where I don't care if it's accurate, or I can tell it to be very precise. So like I ask it to write a program, it'll write a program for me. Lots of people want access to this. When we were having a production problem, we were able to get clean HDMI output, although my friend actually figured this out himself, but still kind of a nice thing, right? So in terms of being able to search for information quickly, like this is a really good way of being able to use this. Like, so I would say if we are limited and don't want to use Microsoft Edge, maybe we don't feel like it's the best browser. It was previously impossible to access Bing Chat, and that is something that is sad, because frankly, it's a free window into ChatGPT 4 that can be quite useful for solving problems. So Vivaldi's decided to do that by just spoofing its user agent string. So like I said previously, if you tried to access Bing Chat on like anything other than Edge, it would prevent you from doing so and tell you that you need to download Edge. And I did that because I use the image creator all the time. It is wonderful. But for the just chat, I'm like, like it's nice, but I wouldn't download the whole browser over it. So I feel like a lot of people haven't tried this out just because you have to have Edge to use it. And I can't honestly wait to get rid of Edge, because now it seems like I can just use another browser or just spoof my user agent. And I don't know why I didn't think of this to begin with, but if you spoof your user agent to the correct one it is expecting, then it'll just let you use Bing Chat, and you can get a free window into ChatGPT 4. You can get like a bunch of responses from it that are very useful for doing all sorts of things, and you don't have to pay for them. So I love free stuff, and ChatGPT 4 is the better of the two when you're like writing responses or whatever else. I hate getting blasted with like the free one now. Like I find it like very easy to detect. So if you want to be able to trick people with AI and write good responses and stuff, then go ahead and just either use Vivaldi or spoof your user agent. And of course, you can do this with a user agent switcher extension, of which I have several, in order to make this work for yourself without needing to install Vivaldi specifically. It's just interesting to see Vivaldi being willing to put it on the line in order to like get access to another company's services on their browser. I don't know if Microsoft is going to get angry about this. Frankly, like I feel like they have the money and the time to get angry about something like this. So good on Vivaldi for like putting themselves out there. I almost expected to see like a comment from Microsoft like on this article, because I'm sure that the bleeping computer person reached out to them for comment, but no comment yet. So seems like Vivaldi is able to let you access the service. And now, I mean, if you just want to spoof your own, then you can go ahead and do it in your own user agent extension without needing to rely on Vivaldi's boldness to pay off for them, because they could get told to stop doing this relatively easy, I feel like. Okay, next up. So do you remember the MountGox crypto exchange?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I barely remember it. So it is a big crypto heist that caused a lot of uproar. Basically, like if you hadn't heard of it, it is a heist that caused I think either the majority or all of the cryptocurrency stored in that exchange to be emptied out and then laundered through a variety of different like Bitcoin tumblers and other stuff. And this was linked back to Russia. So 2 Russians were charged with conspiring to do this, and it looks like a lot more details from this case are kind of coming out now, because it appears that one of them also was running like a sketchy exchange that was used, BTCE, which was used to launder I think like over $1 billion of ransomware payments before it was taken down. They helped cash out 95% of ransomware payments, which is a lot. 95% is a lot of that market. So millions of Bitcoins in deposits and withdrawals, handling transactions worth billions of dollars. Yes. Okay. So not over $1 billion, billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So pretty heavy hitters when it comes to the cybercrime industry, like being able to not only like profit by basically being like a criminal fintech company, but also like being responsible for the exploitation of this cryptocurrency exchange is a pretty high profile thing to do. And it seems to have earned them a indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice. But seeing as they are Russians and in Russia, I am not sure if anything's going to happen with that. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, next up, Microsoft's Azure portal has been down. Kilian, have you experienced this? I know that like you probably interact with like Azure and like some of these other like services a bit more than I do.
I do. I'm a frequent Azure portal user for various things, and I can't say that I noticed it. I mean, I've been traveling a little bit lately, so maybe that's why. But no, I can't say that I have.
Yeah, so Microsoft has stated they're aware of the incident. They're trying to mitigate it, but it seems like Azure portals are affected, and then some other services as well. This is claimed by a threat actor who is going by Anonymous Sudan, and they say that they're angry that the United States is interfering in Sudan, and thus they have initiated an attack. But the timing of the attack and some other things have led people to assume that this is actually like a false flag, like Russian attack, and that it's much more likely that this is an attack that is motivated by Russia or otherwise orchestrated by Russia. Another note is that apparently this is also coming right after denial of service attacks against Outlook.com and OneDrive, which are those three are like most of Microsoft like business offerings. So like a difficult time for a lot of these like cloud services that Microsoft is offering this week.
I just used my Edge browser to try and go to the Azure portal. I didn't log in, but it seemed to work. So maybe they've got it under control, or maybe I'm not, or maybe they filled over to a data center. Who knows what they did?
We have James holding the line in the chat. I will not use Edge. Well, now you don't have to. That's good. Good. I'm glad. I'm glad someone's holding the line there. All right. Next up. So this is a North Korean intelligence operation that is going after a number of different people. They're impersonating journalists and academics and trying to collect intelligence from think tanks, research centers, academic institutions, and various media organizations. I had actually a couple like Twitter DMs that I got that like made me be like, this is the state actor. They're like, hey, do you mind taking a look at my research? I'd really like you to check out this cool exploit I developed. And I'm like, no, that's okay. Cause I'd heard of this, like, I'm like, like, and I do get people who reach out to me and ask for help, like collaborating with research. And that does happen sometimes. So that's why these attacks are like pretty sneaky. What's kind of funny about these is that one of the things that these intelligence agencies are saying is like a giveaway on this is that there's like subtle misspellings in like all of the emails. So for Korean speakers, they noted that like there is like a North Korean dialect to the emails being sent, and then for English speakers, they noted that there's just like lots of like silly misspellings, just like littered throughout these emails. So that's interesting to me because there's ChatGPT now. So unless it's just like completely impossible for them to access, like you should be able to take like even like a misspelled message and make it in perfect English, like ready to go, as easy as spell check. But maybe, I don't know, like I don't know why they're not doing this. It is just still strange to me to see that like we're seeing the primary way of detecting these like nation state spoofing attacks being like them just like making terrible spelling mistakes that an English speaker would know to look for.
So Kody, I saw it a little bit in there, but I wanted to ask you, because you spend a lot of time working with journalists and other folks and kind of advising them on security. What are some best practices that you would recommend to them if they suspect that they are being targeted or might be targeted to defend themselves?
So one thing would be like if a lot of security researchers are like specialists, or they're in like one particular field where like that's really what like they're good at. And if someone's sending you an email and it's a compromised email and it's like in a format you've never seen before or don't work with, like don't open it. We've had some people who have like gotten these files and then attempted to open them in like a sandboxed environment, like a VM or something. And if you're comfortable doing that, then great. But like there's so much contact out there of like potentially compromised files or other things, like either referring it to like the IT people in your organization, like letting them know that this contact is happening when there's like something like suspicious there. It might give them the tip off that they need to keep other people in the organization safe if they're under that sort of attack. It's more of like a group protection thing where like if you notice the signs of something suspicious, it's very likely that other people in your organization are being attacked as well, or like are getting the same thing, and they might not be as tech savvy as you, or they might not catch the same signs. So escalating to like somebody who specializes in that sort of thing is always my advice when you get like a suspicious like attachment or something like that, because these contacts happen all the time, and like there'll be contacts. So like the first couple of emails or the first couple of exchanges will not be infected. They'll like, try to gain some trust initially. And then after they do, that's when they'll start sending like, oh, could you review this for me? Can you take a look at this? Do you mind opening this? And that's when they'll use like, commercially available malware or like things that they've specifically been working with in the past to try to compromise and steal as much information as they can from that person, because that's how they get access to new exploits.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you.
Oh. All right, next up. So this is targeting the aerospace industry. This is called Power Drop, and this is interesting because it's relatively sophisticated. It's kind of doing a living off the land thing using PowerShell primarily. Did you hear about this attack?
I heard about it a little bit. I read the article just a little bit, but I'm not surprised because I mean you and I have talked about this for years. You know, PowerShell's super powerful. I guess pun intended, maybe. Um, but it's so common anymore. It's so easy to do to use this because it's built into every Windows computer basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is using built-in tools to act as a remote backdoor or a rat.
Mm-hmm.
And just the fact that it's sophisticated using off-the-shelf malware, like this is all the signs that we would see of someone who's looking to conceal their identity, has
Mm-hmm.
a good amount of resources, and is going after a target that is likely to get investigated when they get popped.
Yep.
So you don't go with like, I mean, North Korea does this because, they don't care. But typically, if you have access to lots of resources, lots of exploits, like you won't use your
Mm-hmm.
best ones for this. You will instead use sophisticated techniques and like very tricky ways of living off the land
Right.
and not using anything that can be traced back to any particular group, like malware that you can buy off of marketplaces or that has been open source. Like this sort of thing is the foundation for clandestine groups that are well resourced and good at hiding their identities. So that
Mm-hmm.
appears to be what's going on here. Just very technically interesting to see what a very tech savvy and nation state oriented group would be using when going after a very high visibility target. All right, next up we've got oh yes, I love this title. This is actually my contender for most favorite title of all time. Black Hat Ransomware fails to extort commercial Australian commercial law giant. So really like they just refuse to pay the ransom. But I
Yeah.
really like how heroic the company sounds in this title. I don't like they really did choose to take a stand here, and maybe,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they'll get hit for it. It sucks to have your network hacked and then
Right.
outwardly commit to refusing to pay the ransom without seeing all the data yet. But like sometimes that's just the right thing to do. So this law firm works with a lot of very high profile organizations, including government organizations in Australia. There's lots of sensitive information here, and there's 1.45 terabytes of data.
Wow. It's a
Containing
lot.
over 1 million documents stolen from the law firm systems in April of 2023. They're threatening to leak more of the data if they don't meet their demands. So it looks like this data will be released. And I'm seeing identity documents.
Yep.
This is a passport and other sorts of personally identifiable
Mm-hmm.
information, probably up to and including of very important people in Australia. We've seen a lot of breaches in Australia lately, but it's so far listing ANZ Banking Group, the South Australian, I guess that's a news organization, Queensland, and ATC governments, the Environment and Human Services Department, Australian Taxation Office as current or former clients. So data
Mm-hmm.
could belong to all of these organizations. Law firms, I mean, that's what sparked the Panama Papers was like,
Yeah.
a law firm getting breached. So like there's all sorts of juicy details in these legal organizations that are at risk when we have one of these extortion attempts. In this case, it seems like they're just not going to play along. So whoever is or whichever ransomware gang is leaking this information, oh yes, Alpha. It seems like they are probably not going to get paid for this, at least in public. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll have to see what happens. Okay, so this is an interesting attack. This is a proof of concept release for Win32k bug. And this is a privilege escalation vulnerability that has been fixed in Windows 11, but is still something that can be exploited in older Windows installations. And this is something that you already need to have like system access, but it gives you
Mm-hmm.
system privileges. So if you are
Right.
like logged in or if you get access to a system that's already running, you can upgrade yourself to system, which is just lets you basically do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like it's been used in zero-day attacks and a proof of concept was released. However, it also seems like it's just not going to work against like fully updated Windows devices, especially if they are already running Windows 11. That's pretty much it for this one. So if you're curious about how this works, there is a write-up from this company about how it works with the proof of
Yeah.
concept. So you got an old Windows computer that you want to test this out on, it seems as though this is going to go through the entire process of
Mm-hmm.
exploitation with full code and proof of concept. So check it out if you're interested. I just like the fact that they attach the proof of concept just means this is
Yeah.
very fun if you're a researcher. All right, what's next? So we have a cybercrime group that is mixing it up with cybercrime and espionage. Worth mentioning there's a lot of overlap between how these groups
Yeah.
make money, and sometimes they'll be affiliated with nation states or at least like be in league with them if they find anything particularly juicy. They're always trying to make more money, and some of these some of these like I guess I would say like ransomware / extortion attacks like really lead to them finding data that would be extremely valuable to certain people and maybe not like the rest of the internet. So if the victim isn't going to pay, sometimes they'll just offer the information available for sale if they feel like it's juicy enough and somebody would want it. And that's when they can kind of make more money. So this is more like a cybercrime trend than anything else, but still very interesting. I'm going to kind of skip that one though, because I think I got most of the details out. All right. So next up is Chrome is trying to become a real password manager. And why, Kilian, why do you, I mean, maybe you do, but why wouldn't somebody use Chrome as a password manager?
I would worry because it does other stuff. It's a browser, you know, and you could install other extensions and things like that. You have, I would think, additional routes in to maybe connect that. It's not a standalone app, even though it is connected. That would be my fear, to be honest, is just if you have some type of other browser exploiter, you can pop it. That might open up the password manager also. If it's not done right. That would be my biggest fear about it.
Yeah, so the number one selling point of this is convenience. Like having it in the browser means it'll autofill for you. It'll make like your online life a lot easier. The negative part is it's so much more susceptible to like data theft or stealing. There's been lots of different attacks I've seen, like USB rubber ducky style attacks where like you're plugging in a device and it's like going in and copying and sending out like everything in like the Chrome like password manager. And then there's also attacks where people will make like a Java script that runs in the background and like exposes a bunch of different potential form fills and then like will accept text from any form fill that automatically fills. Really interesting how you can like enumerate a bunch of like hidden forms and then see which one the password manager attempts to autofill and then use that to potentially capture credentials. That is an attack that is real and sometimes can trick password managers into autofilling credentials that they're not supposed to. So somebody using something like 1Password or a password manager that's using like a browser extension or something like that, you get an option before it autofills. It asks you, like you have some choices, whereas Chrome, in its attempt to be convenient, will go ahead and just kind of autofill this and make it like, you know, easy for the user. Lots of people like that. And frankly, like it's sometimes easier to opt in than to opt out of the Google password manager because it's just always asks and is trying to be there very like diligently. But they're at least attempting to upgrade this by making some general upgrades for the way that it works and how it secures things. Biometric authentication on the desktop is great. That is making it a lot more like some of these other third-party password managers that are plugins and work very well. Yeah, I appreciate their attempts to upgrade this because a lot of people do use it for its convenience, and it's been the frequent victim of some of these USB-style attacks where, like, once you have access to a computer that's unlocked for a minute, you can frequently dump these credentials pretty easily. I've actually written a couple of them myself. So one that I wrote was on a macOS computer. It was possible to dump the, I think, Chrome and Firefox credentials using a bad USB script. And I used a canary token to like base 64 and then send these out to a remote server. So obviously like not a great thing if you can just plug a device into a computer, grab these credentials and send them out all in less than 30 seconds. So yeah, yikes.
James is saying really quick, I assume the passwords all stay unencrypted once you enter your password in Chrome. That's actually a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but that's that would be bad.
Yeah, I think the thing here is like it used to be possible to access like the passwords in the password manager without authentication in Chrome. If it was like already open or like under certain circumstances, and that's like the basis of a lot of the attacks I saw was just like exporting it real quickly because it just didn't have like a lot of control. It just assumed that if you were logged in using Chrome, like you just were already able to access
authorized.
All right, next up. So this is another ransomware attack. So this is a pharmaceutical company that says that they took a lot of their systems offline and were more or less like rolling with their incident response plan. It was noted that a lot of their IT infrastructure was taken like, you know, off of the internet and they're trying to contain the damage. But it seems that in general, they had like a decent incident response plan and things are like going according to that, or maybe they just have a great PR team. Either way, they are now listed on this ransomware portal. So it seems as though like at least some of the data has been exfiltrated. Aside from that, we don't really know too many more details about this, other than it was noted that a lot of their IT infrastructure went offline, and they did acknowledge that it is a ransomware attack.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately with these things, it's by the time the ransomware actually kicks off, like we talked about, there's a very high chance the data's been exfiltrated because you're going to pay to not have it go out.
Yeah. All right, next up. All right, so Kilian, have you been tracking the Royal Ransomware Gang?
No, not so much. I mean, I've heard of them, but there's so many.
Yeah, there's a lot of like rebranding and other stuff going on, because like these gangs operate as like affiliates sometimes, or otherwise they'll like stand up infrastructure to like use a particular type of software to commit a crime, and then they'll accidentally pop like the city of Dallas, Texas or something, and get so much heat that they need to rebrand and shuffle things around, because law enforcement agencies start going after them with a lot of resources, and really start like looking for that organization. So like Royal Ransomware was seen as potentially rebranding in the immediate future. And it was looking like they were going to be like shifting over to this new like branded encryptor. And then they kind of shifted back. So like they did an operation or two, like using this new brand, and then they've kind of gone back under the new one using a new black suit encryptor. So these groups are always looking for like faster, more stealthy, or easier ways of encrypting their victims, because they often have, as you said, a very limited window for this to work before the restrictions clamp down and incident responders have a chance to start shutting things down and limiting the damage. So yeah, just a little bit of cybercrime drama, just seeing the ways that these organizations are changing their brand, they're trying to implement new technology, and also getting a good amount of heat. Yeah, after going after organizations that they maybe should have just dropped, because sometimes it's just not worth it to have like the whole apparatus of the federal government coming after you at the same time. But if you're good at something, follow your dreams, I guess. All right, so Microsoft, we are talking about how do you get $20 million in privacy violations? Well, you violate a federal law that requires you to not collect information about children. So it seems like Xboxes were collecting information about users who indicated on sign up that they were under 13 years old. And this law specifically deals with children under the age of 13, requiring parental consent, the ability to review and ask for the deletion of the child's personal information, and the ability to refuse data collection. None of that was done. So Xbox was actually collecting this information and storing it for years between 2015 and 2020. And the FTC was accusing Microsoft of storing children's data in its servers without providing parents any of these abilities to delete data or otherwise know that it existed. So that is how you earn a $20 million fine. Microsoft will now have to implement the following practices: informing parents of the additional privacy protections, obtaining parental consent before getting accounts created, deleting all personal data if it is no longer needed for providing the services that dictated the original collection, whatever that means, delete all user data stored on its system that it collected without acquiring parental consent, delete protected data within 2 weeks of the collection date, extend protections to third-party gaming publishers, and then finally extend protections to biometric and health information collected for creating avatars if the collection is combined with personally identifiable information. They collected the avatar information as well. That's weird. So yeah, that's how you get a $20 million fine.
This is just, I mean, it's so dumb too. And I guess the one point that you brought up about like the using it for the purpose it was collected, that almost is like GDPR-like sounding, where if you do collect some of this information, it has to be for the explicit purpose it was collected. You can't send it to your marketing folks and your everybody else to do some type of research on it for some other reason. If you're going to collect it for a specific like legitimate use case, it can't be repurposed for something else. And at least here in the US, we tend to be data hoarders, like just in case something might be useful for somebody else in the future.
Or we can sell it to a third party. Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit of discussion in the chat also about the password manager thing. So previously, the password manager, the Chrome password manager, didn't stay unencrypted, but were accessible with your Windows login password. So if you could Mimikatz it and get access to that password, then you could get access to them, which is like a pretty big password dump. If you're able to get like the user password, and then you can also proceed to get all of their online passwords, like that's a pretty big jump in escalation. All right, we're almost out of time, so we might have to race through these last ones. So this is a really big one. So I've been seeing all sorts of news, including CISA saying that you need to upgrade because of this, about this Move It bug. Kilian, have you seen anything about this?
I keep seeing the headlines on it, but I haven't had quite enough time to dive in deep to really understand it.
So this is, I think, the piece of news that we're going to be hearing the most about over the next several weeks. So this was I guess like a data transfer service that the CoOp Ransomware gang gained access to, and they are operating in extortion mode. They're not looking to be, despite their name, CoOp Ransomware. They are still in this case looking like they are reaching out to and doing extortion attacks on anybody that has been involved in this. And it seems like a lot of very large companies were involved in this breach. They're saying that the military, children's hospitals, governments, etc., like this, we know to attack. I'm sorry, etc. Like this, we know to attack. So that's reassuring. And all their data was erased. But anybody who doesn't fit a children's hospital, a government, or a military, it seems, is open season. At this point, it seems like this breach has been done. They have got most of the information they're looking for. And now it's going to be a period of time of them sifting through the information, deciding how valuable that data is and who it's valuable to, and then reaching out to the organizations impacted and trying to get a ransom from them. So yeah, big attack, lots of companies. That's the wrong story. Big attack, lots of companies involved. And so bad that the cybersecurity infrastructure organization is advising people that they need to get this fixed immediately, because it is going to be, if the CoOp Ransomware gang hasn't already gotten your data, somebody else will grab it in the immediate future.
Yeah.
All right, so we got two more. Let's see if we can do it. So Atomic Wallet hack leading to over $35 million in stolen crypto. So again, we do not have our cryptozoology expert here to explain to us the implication of this, or what the value of these cryptos are. But it seems like, another crypto theft. So I barely care about cryptocurrency, I'm going to be honest. But at the same time, a lot of these attacks are very clever and are using all sorts of like new ways of hacking organizations to like do like smart contracts, like exploits or other sorts of things that move a lot of cryptocurrency very quickly.
Yeah.
Seems like we're still early in the process of figuring out what went down, but the developers have taken down their download servers, likely out of concern that their software was breached, and perhaps there was a supply chain attack here. So don't have much else to say about this other than a lot of crypto just got stolen. And then finally, I think our last story. This one's good. So all right, we're at Kilian. I know you got to go, but so this is a new attack that is actually going after websites to use them as C2 servers. And this is injecting credit card skimmers on targeted e-commerce websites. And what's kind of happening is like it'll go after vulnerable websites, use it as a place to stage like the communication, and then kind of use that website's legitimacy to get around any sort of like malware detection or like malicious IP address connection sort of vulnerability. So it's basically acting as a proxy to like get a bunch of credit card scammers the ability to run tons and tons of cards that they've bought off the darknet. So not a lot of like other super interesting details here, other than that it's a widespread attack and it's part of cybercrime infrastructure that allows these kind of brute forcing like credit card skimming attacks to go undetected for long periods of time.
Pretty scary stuff, but I mean, it's smart in a way, because if they're running it on, like, this is not a Microsoft, I'm not saying they're involved or anything, but hey, you spin up something in Azure, that's typically trusted by a lot of people, and you can run it through there and proxy it off, or Amazon or whoever is running this infrastructure or websites. It's much harder to detect.
Yeah, no, there's always a value to an infected computer, whether it's an infected router or an infected website. Like there's always a value to someone, either as part of their infrastructure or as like something they can use to stage something. It's very interesting. All right, so that's about all the time we have this week. I want to thank everybody who was very active in our stream today, and of course, Kilian for coming on. Kilian, also thank you for walking us through the new Varonis threat research. If you guys want to learn more about it, I will update my varonis.com/Kody link to go directly to this research so you can check it out this week. Again, just super cool to be able to release this much research this quickly, because it does take a lot of time to both do and get this research cleared, because everything has to be fixed before we can talk about it. So very, very cool. And if you want to support the stream, make sure to go to varonis.com/Kody, Kody, to check out this research and what we're talking about this week. And we will see you all back on the stream on Wednesday for our weekly Q&A. If you want to drop a question, make sure to either go to the Security Forward channel, that's Security FWD, in order to leave your question there, or you can go to our Discord server on nugget.lol, nugget, nugget.lol, and leave it in the comment section, and I will make sure to get it answered. So see you all next time. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.